They can't believe you never contacted them again. The silence is louder than any argument you ever had. The absence is more powerful than any explanation you could have given. They expected you to chase. They expected you to beg. They expected you to circle back with apologies you did not owe. They expected your heart to remain available even after they mishandled it. But now there is quiet. Now there is distance. Now there is a boundary so firm, so unshakable, that it has forced them to confront something they never thought they would face. The reality that you finally chose your peace over their approval. Listen carefully. Your silence was not weakness. It was awakening. It was the moment God began to restore your dignity. It was the hour your spirit stopped negotiating with disrespect. It was the season when your soul decided that access to you is a privilege, not a right. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they never believed you had the strength to walk away. They mistook your kindness for dependency. They misread your patience as permanence. They assumed your loyalty meant you would tolerate anything. But when God opens your eyes, you no longer cling to what is draining you. You release it. There comes a time when continuing to reach out becomes a betrayal of your own calling. There comes a moment when sending one more message, making one more call, extending one more opportunity feels like you are shrinking yourself to fit into a space that no longer honors who you are becoming. And when God begins to elevate your awareness, you realize that not every connection is meant to follow you into your next season. Some people were assignments, not destinies. Some relationships were lessons, not lifetimes. They can't believe you never contacted them again because they were used to controlling the rhythm. They were used to your consistency. They were used to knowing that no matter what they did, you would eventually return. But growth changes patterns. Healing disrupts cycles. And when God heals a heart, He also strengthens its boundaries. You did not disappear out of bitterness. You withdrew out of wisdom. You stepped back because your spirit could no longer afford the cost of constant emotional labor. You chose alignment over attachment. Understand this deeply. Walking away is not revenge. Silence is not cruelty. Distance is not hatred. Sometimes it is obedience. Sometimes it is self-respect. Sometimes it is the only way to preserve the peace God is building within you. When you stopped contacting them, you were not trying to prove a point. You were protecting a purpose. There is power in restraint. There is authority in self-control. There is strength in refusing to argue with someone who is committed to misunderstanding you. The old you would have defended yourself endlessly. The old you would have explained, clarified, justified, and tried to fix what you did not break. But transformation changes your response. Maturity changes your posture. When God refines you, you learn that not every battle deserves your voice. They can't believe you never contacted them again because your absence forced them to feel what your presence used to cover. Your support, your encouragement, your loyalty, those things were invisible when they were constant. Now that they are gone, the silence exposes the weight of what they lost. And here is the truth. You did not leave to make them miss you. You left because you finally understood your value. God does not call you to chase what continually rejects you. God does not assign you to beg for respect. God does not design you to be an option in rooms where you were meant to be an asset. When you internalize this truth, your energy shifts. You stop performing for validation. You stop auditioning for acceptance. You stand in quiet confidence, knowing that your worth was never dependent on someone else's recognition. And let me speak boldly to your spirit sometimes. God removes your voice from someone's life so they can learn the lesson your presence was preventing. Sometimes your constant forgiveness shielded them from the consequences of their behavior. Sometimes your willingness to stay kept them from realizing how much they were taking for granted. Your silence is not punishment, it is perspective. You have entered a season where peace is more important than being understood. You have entered a season where growth matters more than nostalgia. You have entered a season where your loyalty is sacred, not automatic. When God elevates your thinking, He also upgrades your standards. And upgraded standards will always confuse those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They can't believe you never contacted them again because they were certain you would come back. But something shifted inside you, something awakened. You realized that chasing closure from someone who refuses accountability is a trap. You realize that constant contact with someone who drains you is not love, it is self-neglect. You realize that if God is calling you forward, you cannot keep turning around. There is a difference between forgiveness and access. You can forgive someone and still close the door. You can release resentment and still refuse to reopen the conversation. Forgiveness frees your heart. Boundaries guard your future. And when God teaches you this distinction, you begin to move differently. You stop confusing endurance with endurance of abuse. You stop calling suffering loyalty. You stop romanticizing dysfunction. The silence you chose was not impulsive. It was prayerful. It was thoughtful. It was the result of countless nights where your spirit felt heavy and your mind wrestled with whether to keep trying. But eventually, clarity came. Eventually, God whispered to your heart that enough was enough. Eventually, you understood that continuing to reach out was delaying your own elevation. And let me remind you of something profound. Not everyone deserves a final explanation. Not everyone qualifies for your emotional labor. Not everyone is entitled to your vulnerability. Sometimes the greatest statement you can make is no statement at all. Silence can be a sermon. Distance can be a declarata. Absence can be an announcement that you have outgrown the environment. They can't believe you never contacted them again because your silence shattered their assumptions. It exposed the fact that you were not as dependent as they thought. It revealed that your love was a gift, not a need. And gifts can be withdrawn when they are mishandled. God is not preparing you for a life of chasing. He is preparing you for a life of alignment. Alignment means you no longer force conversations that feel unnatural. Alignment means you stop investing where there is no reciprocity. Alignment means you trust that if something is meant to stay, it will respect your boundaries without needing constant reminders. You are not heartless. You are healed. You are not cold. You are clear. There is a difference. Clarity often feels like coldness to those who benefited from your confusion. When you were unsure of your worth, they were comfortable. When you began to recognize your value, they felt threatened. Growth always disrupts dynamics that were built on imbalance. Do not feel guilty for choosing peace. Do not apologize for evolving. Do not shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable. If God is expanding you, let Him. If God is stretching you, trust Him. If God is separating you, believe that He sees what you do not. They can't believe you never contacted them again because they thought your silence would not last. They assumed you would miss them more than you missed your own peace. But what they did not understand is that once you taste inner stability, you cannot return to emotional chaos. Once God teaches you how to sit in solitude without feeling lonely, you stop chasing any that compromises your spirit. You have learned that presence without respect is emptiness. You have learned that communication without accountability is manipulation. You have learned that staying where you are tolerated instead of celebrated slowly erodes your confidence. And now that you know these truths, you cannot unknow them. Let this sink deep into your spirit. Walking away is sometimes the bravest form of faith. It is faith that God will replace what you release. It is faith that what is meant for you will not require you to beg. It is faith that your future is not attached to someone who could not honor your present. They can't believe you never contacted them again, but you are no longer concerned with their disbelief. Your focus has shifted. Your energy has been redirected. Your heart is being rebuilt. And in this rebuilding, God is restoring more than your confidence. He is restoring your identity. You are not defined by who left. You are not defined by who misunderstood you. You are not defined by who failed to appreciate you. You are defined by the resilience God placed within you. You are defined by the courage to break patterns. You are defined by the strength to choose yourself without becoming bitter. There is a quiet power in moving on without announcement. There is dignity in letting your growth speak for itself. You do not need to broadcast your boundaries. You do not need to dramatize your departure. You simply live differently. You respond differently. You allow access differently. And here is the deeper truth. Sometimes God uses silence to teach both parties. He teaches you how to detach without hatred. He teaches them how to value what they while lost. Whether they learn the lesson is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is obedience to the peace God is cultivating within you. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because your absence disrupted their comfort. But your calling is greater than someone else's convenience. Your destiny is larger than someone else's expectations. And your peace is too sacred to sacrifice for familiarity. Stand firm in what you have chosen. Do not let nostalgia weaken your resolve. Do not let temporary loneliness push you back into permanent dysfunction. Remember why you walked away. Remember how you felt when you were constantly reaching. Remember the exhaustion. Remember the imbalance. And remember the relief that followed your decision. God did not bring you this far to return you to what broke you. God did not awaken your discernment so you could ignore it. God did not strengthen your heart so you could hand it back to someone who mishandled it. They can't believe you never contacted them again. Let them wonder. Let them question. Let them reflect. Meanwhile, you continue building. You continue healing. You continue aligning with the highest standard God has written into your spirit. Your silence was not an ending. It was a beginning. It was the doorway into self-respect. It was the foundation of a new chapter. It was the evidence that you finally trust God more than you trust your fears of being alone. And hear this with clarity and conviction. The right connections will never require you to shrink. The right people will never be shocked by your boundaries. The right relationships will never be threatened by your growth. What is truly aligned with you will celebrate your evolution, not resent it. Do you understand what truly happened when you decided not to reach back? A chain broke. A cycle ended. A pattern that had repeated itself for years suddenly lost its grip. That decision was not random. It was not emotional instability. It was not pride. It was awakening under the authority of God. When God shifts your inner world, your outer responses begin to reflect it. You no longer react out of habit. You respond out of alignment. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they are still operating from the version of you that no longer exists. They remember the you who tolerated mixed signals. They remember the you who over-explained. They remember the you who carried conversations on tired shoulders and patched cracks that you did not create. But God has refined you since then. God has sharpened your discernment. God has strengthened your backbone. And when God strengthens the soul, the old access points begin to close. There is something holy about restraint. In a world that urges you to respond instantly, to defend immediately, to correct every misunderstanding, your silence becomes a testimony of discipline. Discipline is not about suppressing emotion. It is about mastering it. It is about refusing to let temporary feelings sabotage long-term purpose. God is not preparing you to be reactive. God is preparing you to be steady. And steadiness confuses those who are used to your impulsive compassion. Look deeper into the reason they are stunned. It is not merely that you stopped contacting them. It is that you stopped seeking validation from them. You stopped asking to be chosen. You stopped waiting to be prioritized. You stopped measuring your worth by their responsiveness. And when you detach your self-worth from someone's approval, you become unshakable. God is the only standard you need. God is the only validation that carries eternal weight. Some people never expected you to grow beyond the role they assigned you. They labeled you as the pursuer, the fixer, the one who always comes back. But God never called you to live inside someone else's low expectation. God called you to rise. God called you to mature. God called you to reflect strength, not desperation. And rising will always shock those who are comfortable with your smaller version. Let this truth penetrate your spirit. Your silence revealed who truly valued you. When you stopped reaching, the balance was exposed. When you stopped initiating, the effort or lack of it became visible. Silence is a mirror. It reflects intentions. It reveals motives. It clarifies where you truly stand. And clarity is a gift from God. It may sting, but it saves you from deeper wounds later. You must understand that not every door deserves a final knock. Some doors close because God is redirecting you. Some connections fade because your assignment with them has expired. And when an assignment is over, clinging to it delays your next instruction. God does not waste seasons. If something has fallen away, trust that it served its purpose. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they thought you feared losing them. But what they did not realize is that you began to fear losing yourself. You began to see that constant pursuit was draining your confidence. You began to sense that your peace was being traded for temporary reassurance. And when you finally chose inner stability over outer approval, heaven aligned with your decision. There is courage in allowing people to misunderstand you. There is maturity in resisting the urge to correct every narrative. God sees the truth of your heart. That is enough. You do not need to win every perception battle. You do not need to chase every rumor. When your conscience is clear before God, you can rest. And rest is powerful. Your absence was not designed to manipulate. It was designed to liberate. You liberated your time. You liberated your thoughts. You liberated your emotional energy. Energy is sacred. Attention is sacred. Focus is sacred. And once you understand that these are gifts from God, you stop distributing them carelessly. Sometimes the reason you stop contacting them is because God was teaching you detachment. Detachment does not mean indifference. It means you no longer cling to outcomes. It means you no longer force what resists you. It means you trust that what is aligned with your destiny will not require you to diminish yourself. Detachment is faith in action. Let me speak to the part of you that still feels tempted to reach out. That urge is familiar comfort calling your name. But comfort is not always calling you forward. Sometimes comfort calls you backward into cycles you prayed to escape. Remember the prayers you whispered when you felt unseen. Remember the tears you shed when you felt undervalued. God heard those prayers. God collected those tears, and your silence is part of the answer. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they underestimated your breaking point. Every soul has a threshold. Every heart has a limit. Patience does not mean endless tolerance. Mercy does not mean unlimited access. God teaches balance, and when balance is restored, extremes disappear. You no longer swing between overgiving and resentment. You stand centered. You are entering a season where alignment matters more than attachment. Alignment is about shared direction. It is about mutual respect. It's about growth in the same rhythm. Attachment without alignment leads to frustration. But alignment under God brings peace. And peace is not negotiable. There is also a deeper spiritual principle at work. When you stop chasing what pulls away, you create space for what moves toward you. When you release what drains you, you make room for what strengthens you. God cannot fill hands that are clenched around expired connections. Release is not loss, it is preparation. Do not interpret their shock as your responsibility. Their disbelief is not your burden. If they are confused, let them reflect. If they are surprised, let them process. You are not obligated to shrink your growth to make it easier for someone else to understand. Growth is sometimes lonely, but it is always rewarding. You must also recognize that silence tests sincerity. When you stopped initiating, you gave them an opportunity to show effort, an opportunity to demonstrate value, an opportunity to pursue. If nothing happened, that silence answered more clearly than words ever could. God reveals truth through stillness. And let this settle deeply within you. Your future is too significant to be anchored to someone who cannot meet you at your level of maturity. God is developing you for greater responsibility, greater influence, greater impact. You cannot carry that calling while dragging unresolved dynamics behind you. There is a refinement happening inside you. It is subtle but powerful. Your standards are higher. Your conversations are deeper. Your tolerance for inconsistency is lower. This is not arrogance. This is evolution. And evolution under the guidance of God is sacred. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they assumed your love was unconditional in access. But unconditional love does not mean unlimited permission. You can wish someone well and still wish them far. You can pray for their growth and still walk your own path. Separation does not cancel goodwill. Your silence also protected your dignity. There is dignity in walking away from environments where your presence is not cherished. There is dignity in refusing to beg for reciprocity. There is dignity in trusting God to compensate for what you release. Dignity is strength wrapped in calmness. The world may call it pride, but pride seeks superiority. What you chose was stability. Stability does not shout. It does not argue. It stands. It stands on conviction. It stands on self-respect. It stands on trust in God. As you move forward, guard your heart, but do not harden it. There is a difference. Guarding means wisdom. Hardening means fear. God does not want you close. He wants you discerning. Learn the lesson without losing your softness. Maintain your compassion without abandoning your boundaries. One day they may attempt to reconnect. One day curiosity may drive them to reach out. When that moment comes, your response must be guided by clarity, not nostalgia. Ask yourself whether the pattern has changed. Ask yourself whether there is accountability. Ask yourself whether peace accompanies the thought. God's guidance will never feel chaotic. Until then, keep building, keep refining, keep growing in quiet excellence. Let your transformation be visible not through announcements, but through outcomes. Let your peace be evident. Let your stability be unshakable. They cannot believe you never contacted them again, but you know why. You know the nights of reflection. You know the internal wrestling. You know the prayers. You know the moment when something inside you settled and said, enough. That moment was sacred. That moment was a turning point, and now you stand in a place you once feared but secretly needed. A place where your worth is no longer negotiated. A place where your heart is no longer stretched thin, trying to hold together something that God was gently dismantling. There is strength in this stillness. There is authority in this composure. There is a quiet fire in your spirit that was not there before. That fire was lit the moment you realized that you answered to God, not to people's expectations. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they thought history guaranteed access. They believed shared memories entitled them to your future. But history is not destiny. Shared time is not a lifetime contract. God writes your story in chapters, and not everyone from one chapter is assigned to the next. Some characters exit because the plot is advancing. Some names fade because your calling is expanding. What you did was not abandonment, it was discernment. Discernment is a sacred gift from God. It allows you to see beneath behavior into intention. It allows you to sense when effort is one-sided. It allows you to recognize when connection becomes consumption. And when discernment matures, you no longer ignore red flags just to keep peace. You choose peace by honoring the warning. There was a time you feared losing them, but now you fear losing alignment with God more than losing anyone else. That shift changes everything. When alignment becomes your priority, approval becomes optional. When obedience to God becomes your focus, human validation loses its grip. Understand this deeply. You are not required to revisit what God has already released you from. You are not required to keep doors unlocked that were meant to close. There are seasons when God asks you to stay and fight, but there are also seasons when God commands you to move and trust. Wisdom is knowing the difference, and you have grown wise. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they assumed your silence meant weakness. But silence can be strength restrained. Silence can be faith activated. Silence can be trust in God's justice rather than your own explanation. When you do not defend yourself, when you do not chase, when you do not argue, you are declaring that God is sufficient to handle what you release. Some people only recognize value when absence creates contrast. Your presence was constant. They adapted to it. Your kindness was consistent. They normalized it. But now that you are no longer there to cushion their chaos, reality feels different. And that difference is not your responsibility to manage. Let me speak to your heart. The reason your silence feels powerful is because it aligns with your growth. H. You are no longer driven by impulse. You are driven by intention. You are no longer reacting to emotional triggers. You are responding from spiritual stability. That stability is evidence that God has been working within you in ways you cannot fully measure. There is also another layer to this journey. When you stopped contacting them, you broke an internal dependency, not just on them, but on the need to be needed. That is profound. Sometimes we cling not because we love deeply, but because we fear irrelevance. But God did not create you to measure your importance by someone's reliance on you. Your importance is rooted in your purpose. You are not called to be someone's emotional crutch. You are called to stand upright in your own destiny. And destiny requires clarity. Destiny requires discipline. Destiny requires detachment from anything that blurs your focus. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because your silence contradicted their narrative about you. They told themselves you would always come back. They convinced themselves you were too invested to withdraw. But what they did not anticipate was the power of internal awakening. When God awakens your spirit, old narratives collapse. And here is a truth that will liberate you even more. You do not owe loyalty to patterns that harm you. Loyalty is sacred, but it must be reciprocal. Loyalty without mutual respect becomes self-betrayal. God calls you to integrity, not to silent suffering. Integrity means you honor truth even when it costs you familiarity. Perhaps the most powerful part of your silence is this: your peace has increased. You sleep differently. You think differently. You carry yourself differently. There is less anxiety. There is less overanalyzing. There is less emotional turbulence. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. When God removes noise, clarity enters. When God subtracts confusion, direction becomes sharper. You may have lost a connection, but you gain composure. You may have lost constant communication, but you gain consistent peace. And peace is priceless. Do not let loneliness trick you into revisiting what God freed you from. Loneliness is temporary. Misalignment is costly. Sometimes silence feels heavy at first because you are detoxing from constant emotional stimulation. But once the detox is complete, your spirit stabilizes. You realize that quiet is not emptiness, it is space for growth. They cannot believe you never contacted them again because they thought time would weaken your resolve. But time has strengthened it. Every day you chose not to reach back, your self-respect deepened. Every moment you resisted the urge to check in, your discipline solidified. You are building internal muscles that will support you in greater seasons ahead. And let me remind you of something eternal. God is not limited by who leaves your life. God is not constrained by who misunderstands you. God is not dependent on any single human connection to fulfill your destiny. If someone exits, it is not the collapse of your future. It is often the clearing of your path. There is also wisdom in understanding that not all silence is permanent. Sometimes it is a pause. Sometimes it is a test. Sometimes it is preparation. But whatever it is, you must let God define its purpose. Do not rush to fill the gap. Do not force a reconnection just to relieve discomfort. Trust divine timing.